I mean, that is the point of vaccine mandates, is that you tighten the restrictions on people until they break down and say, well, I'm going to get it. Althea, how are you reading how this might play out, or how Mr. O'Toole handled it this week?
The caucus agreed to respect and abide by new rules which require parliamentarians attending the House of Commons and Senate to be vaccinated. At the earliest opportunity, a question of privilege will be raised in the House of Commons to challenge the improper conduct and precedent set by the Board of Internal Economy.
So with less than a month to go now, Erin O'Toole is promising that his MPs will respect and challenge the mandatory vaccination policy for the House of Commons. What message is the party sending? Chantal, Andrew, Althea back for another round of At Issue. Andrew, I'll start with you on this one. Was this sort of the best and only compromise Erin O'Toole could get to with his party on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got a section of his party that, frankly, is out to lunch on this subject. That is not persuaded by a pretty overwhelming scientific consensus. Sounds like a familiar term when it comes to the pandemic. And he's been made to look, I think, very foolish needlessly, because ultimately the decision is going to be made, and ultimately everyone's going to have to abide by the vaccine mandate. But in the process, he's taken, I think, at least 3 positions in the last week. He was going to abide by the mandate, then he was going to challenge it, and now he's going to both abide by it and challenge it. Which, as silly as that sounds, is probably the position he should have landed on at the beginning, which is, yes, there's a legitimate issue about who should decide the rule. It should not be the Board of Internal Economy, but the rule is the right one, and the rule is the rule that's going to be decided by the whole House of Commons. And of course, as you may have suggested off the top, he's also left open this question of, well, anybody who attends the House of Commons is going to have to be vaccinated. It leaves open the question of, are some of them going to stay home? Which, given the Tory position, which is that we're not going to, we don't favor allowing hybrid sittings anymore, leaves open the possibility that some of them will just be basically goofing off.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the people who aren't vaccinated, who I understand are not like double digits at this stage, we're talking a handful of people, will just stay home until this gets dealt with in some other way. But the other people have this issue around freedom of choice, it sounds like, from the things I hear, Chantal. And I wonder whether that is, I don't know, whether it's resonating with people or whether it makes sense.
I don't think that the critical mass in the Conservative caucus, and I include senators in there, are really up for having a fight over freedom of choice on the issue of vaccines. Be it only because they themselves have some staff that have health issues, that do not really want to be spending their days with freedom of choices. And I think that was the message this week to those who will not be vaccinated. Now, the problem with staying at home for whoever is left has been shoveled forward by Erin O'Toole, but the fact is that if they don't come from some driving distance of Ottawa, they're not going to be able to get on a plane to get here. Right. And if they are in Ottawa and have driven, they're not going to be able to go into a restaurant to get food. Yeah. So it's a pretty dire life, the freedom of choice being what it is. But I think that battle, the Conservatives walked away from it this week.
Yeah, I mean, that is the point of vaccine mandates, is that you tighten the restrictions on people until they break down and say, well, I'm going to get it. Althea, how are you reading how this might play out, or how Mr. O'Toole handled it this week?
One, I'd like to say that at least the Conservative caucus is meeting, because the Liberals still have not had a caucus meeting since the election. So at least the Tories are meeting.
No,
many of them are not happy about it. Mr. O'Toole doesn't seem to have learned the lessons of the election campaign. Like, yet again, this is like the same thing that we saw with conscience rights, that we saw with gun control. Yeah. It took him too long to land to this position. Yes, there was an argument that the Board of Internal Economy, this kind of committee that in this case met behind closed doors to discuss this, shouldn't be the body making decisions that curb the rights of individual members of Parliament. But that is actually what the board does all the time. Like, this board, in a vote, agreed to fine NDP MPs, some of them hundreds of thousands of dollars, for participating in a satellite office scheme. So it's not like this is the first time the board has taken a decision by a vote. Mr. O'Toole was squeezed between either taking a stance that suggested that he supported the anti-vaxxers, or taking a stance that suggested that he was in favor of vaccine mandates, and then having some members of his caucus, because they were going to stand up and suggest that the board had no right to do this. So he needed to find a middle ground. In the end, this probably pleases nobody. It does, however, raise an interesting question about the MPs some of whom are double vaccinated, but have shown not support for, but concern about, and have chosen to vocalize the fears of some of their constituents who are anti-vaxxers, or people who kind of suggest that they're not vaccinated, but we don't really know. Like, I think of Leslyn Lewis, the former leadership challenger. Will she show up in the House? Will she choose to sit at home? And perhaps it will mute the voices of his loudest critics. So there may be some benefit to this position. I guess we'll see on November 22nd.
Yeah, but I think the first test of that, this isn't over by any measure, is will Mr. O'Toole be appointing people who will not reveal their vaccine status or who are not vaccinated to his shadow cabinet?
How could he?
That's the next question.
Which is
and we shouldn't overlook the potential for mischief here as a sort of a proxy way of tormenting the leader because you have doubts about his leadership. You can using this as the issue with which to cause him low-grade trouble or high-grade trouble over time. I wouldn't put it past people.
Okay, I got to leave it there for this week. But you guys have done double duty all week, and I thank you for coming back. And I'll see you next week. Thanks.